Richard Cooper.
I'd like all of you to take a moment to think about your first days in the business. How scared were you? Did you ever wonder how the hell you were going to make it in this business? I don't know about all of you, but those are some of the thoughts running through my mind. Over time, I started to figure it out, and my thoughts turned to bigger issues, like how is I going to build my business, and how is I going to learn how to deal with high net worth individuals? Today, I want to share with you what I've done to accomplish this, and in the process, create a satisfying career selling life insurance. For 28 years, my business is centered on having goals, having a process, working with mentors, focusing on building relationships, asking better questions and listening to my clients, becoming a trusted advisor, and being proud of what I do. For me, staying focused on these principles has had a tremendous impact on my business throughout the course of my career. For over 28 years, my plan has been based on training I received with the Grantham system. I don't know if any of you remember that, but this is one of the cards that I used for my early days back in 1986. There were 3 numbers in that program that kick-started the process. They led to all the other activity in my business in the years to come. 10, 3, 1. If I spoke to 10 people, 3 would grant me an appointment, and ultimately 1 would buy from me. Initially, my goal was to make 3 appointments a day. I still follow this routine to this day because my experience has proven that these steps have been very important to my success. Think about your top clients. No doubt, in addition to lengthy business plans, their success has been realized by setting clearly defined goals. My business is no different. At the beginning of each year, I take the time to set goals. On paper, I lay out a series of monthly goals for business I want to write and income that I expect to earn, and I review them regularly. I remember my father saying to me, goals give you a reason to get up each day. They give you focus and they create momentum. He was right, because in hindsight, if I ever feel like I've lost momentum or focus, it's because I've lost sight of what my goals were. My dad was a very important person to me. He was a loving father, but he was also my personal coach and a mentor. Which takes me to my next point, mentoring. Mentoring is so valuable. My experience taught me that successful business leaders all turn to mentors to help them over the course of their careers. Let me see a show of hands. Who here has worked with a mentor? Terrific. Those of you that work with a mentor will find that you wind up having greater confidence and go on to realize greater success in your profession. Another question. Who of you in the audience have mentored people? Excellent. Another fact is that mentors wind up benefiting much the same way that their mentees do. They all learn new ideas to help each other in their businesses. Over the last 28 years, mentors have been very important in my business development. Early on, I approached successful advisors in the insurance business and asked them for advice on how I could get off to a good start. I'm not sure if he's here today, but I remember spending time with Tim Mitchell, getting his advice on how to prospect and build my business. We all know Lawrence Geller. Lawrence spent hours with me teaching me about disability insurance and the need professionals had for this valuable coverage. One of my earliest goals was to one day work alongside one of the icons in our industry, Sheldon Turk. Without question, Sheldon has been the most important mentor for me, and I'm proud to say that he and I have worked together for almost 25 years. And without question, his guidance, his advice, and his support have been central to my success over the years in my career. At Creative Planning, mentoring has been the cornerstone of our philosophy for over 43 years. We've been deliberate in our efforts to create a professional environment where we all learn from each other. Long ago, we realized that everybody had something valuable to offer the group, whether they've been in the business for a year or for 40 years. So if you haven't found a mentor or mentored someone, please make it your goal to do so. This will transform your business. Which brings me to the next point I want to talk about. It centers around questions that I ask my clients. When I'm in a sales interview, the questions I ask are soft fact or open-ended questions. Soft fact questions designed to engage my client in a conversation so that they can tell me about their life. These are questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no, or another one-word answer. A few examples of a soft fact question. When I'm sitting with a business owner, I'll ask, tell me, how did you start the business? Or if you died last night, what happens to your shares? In a non-threatening way, soft fact questions force my client to think before they answer. My goal in our discussion is to get my client to open up and share with me their thoughts and feelings about the people and the relationships in their life. I want to know how they got started in their career, how they feel about their spouse and their children. I want to learn what's important to them. By asking these kinds of questions, I give my client the opportunity to do something that they rarely get the chance to do. That's to tell their story. In my opinion, we all need to become better listeners. That's the next point I want to raise. I feel that one of the biggest reasons many of us don't close a sale is because we're not listening to what our clients are telling us. As a result, we don't hear them tell us what's really important to them and how we can really help them in the planning they want us to do for them. Moments earlier, I talked about my father and what a valuable coach and mentor he was. He also happened to be one of the best salesmen alive. When he retired, he was in charge of international sales for a large multinational lighting company. And after I began selling insurance, Dad told me a great story, which I think was his way of really impressing the importance of listening to our client. You see, years before he was in the lighting business, for a very short period of time, my dad sold cars. One night, a customer walked into the dealership to check out the latest model sedan that had just arrived at the dealership. Now think of it. Back then, everybody smoked. This customer was no different. The customer became fixated on the fact that this new car came equipped with a light in the ashtray. This customer thought this was the greatest option he'd ever seen. When my dad asked why, the customer went on to tell him he could now drive home at night in the dark and not worry about getting ashes all over his pants, the seats, and the floor mats, because he could now see where the ashtray was in the dark. My dad went on to tell me how throughout the course of the next hour or so, he incorporated that light in the ashtray into every other feature and benefit of that new car. Whatever they talked about, my dad brought the conversation right back to that light in the ashtray. And at the end of the evening, because my dad listened to his customer, he sold that car to that customer because it had a light in the ashtray. Getting back to the questions, for the questioning process to work, you've got to be naturally curious when you ask your questions. You're not supposed to challenge your clients with the questions that you ask. And I want you to think of it another way. Picture a baby carriage in the sand. If you try and push it, what happens? It gets stuck. However, if you turn around and you pull it, you can drag that baby carriage or take it anywhere you want to go. This is exactly the same objective that I have with the questions that I ask my clients in a meeting. During a sales interview, it's my intention to get my clients to talk freely about how they feel about the people and the relationships that are important to them in their life. If I ask the right questions, the answers I get will help my client or prospect understand that they're going to have a problem if they die too soon, they become disabled, or they get critically ill. If they're doing all the talking and I'm doing all the listening, I know I'm on the right track. With this approach, my business has evolved over the years from selling a product to building relationships and solving problems. It's my goal to become a trusted advisor to my clients. We've heard that many times this morning, and I think that that's probably one of the most important things that we all aim to achieve. My objective is to make my clients understand that as they prosper, I'm going to be there to help them in their journey as they create and want to protect their wealth. Let me share an example of the success I've had in this regard. I want to tell you about a relationship with my good friend Marty that started over 10 years ago. We were introduced initially because he wanted to put in a group insurance plan. I soon discovered that we had many common interests, and quickly a friendship developed outside of our normal business relationship. After a game of golf one day together, we were having a drink and got into a discussion about the long-term succession plan of his business. Now, he had a partner, and I knew that he and his partner, Jerry, were now starting to take healthy incomes out of their business, and I also knew that they didn't have a shareholders agreement. Casually, our conversation turned to his business. I asked him, "Tell me, if you died last night, where does your wife Sue get her income from?" Marty said that if he died, Sue would continue to own his shares, and therefore she'd be able to continue to draw his income. I asked him how he thought about this, and more importantly, how he thought his partner would feel about this. And I was also curious to see how CRA would handle this particular situation, which we figured we would address with his accountants in a later meeting. I then asked him, "Do I assume that if your partner Jerry died, you'd be okay if his wife Lee were to continue to own his shares?" "Not a chance," he said. "Why?" I asked. Aside from the fact that Marty didn't like or trust Lee, he explained that there was no way he would ever want to have to answer to her for any decision relating to his business. If that were to happen, he'd want to buy back Jerry's shares from his wife Lee if Jerry died. "How's that going to happen?" I asked. Together we talked about the mechanics of a share buyback, and we did the math to figure out what the real cost would be to buy back those shares. In the end, we figured out it would require an awful lot of money to do that, and money that the business did not have. Through our discussion, Marty was able to visualize the financial and emotional pressure that this problem would create, and I could see how uncomfortable he was, and he ultimately asked me, "What do I do? I'm sure you've got some ideas. Can we talk about it?" The second equally important issue that we talked about was how, in the absence of a signed buy-sell agreement, would he be able to get Jerry's wife Lee to agree to sell him back the shares she now owned? It was apparent to him after our discussion that without a shareholders agreement and insufficient liquidity, there'd be a financial mess for the business, the deceased partner's estate, and the surviving shareholder. I met with Marty and Jerry at their office a week or so later, and we reviewed all the issues together, and they, in the end, both agreed that purchasing life insurance to fund their buyout made the most economic sense. In the end, they wound up purchasing over $3 million of life insurance. There would now be enough money to completely fund the buyout of either one of them if they died, and we also made sure that there was enough liquidity left in the business to make sure it would survive as a result of the financial storm that would be created due to the loss of a key shareholder. And a few weeks later, I personally accompanied Marty and Jerry to a lawyer I work with that could assist them in drafting up a proper buy-sell agreement, which was now signed and in place. You see, since that initial meeting with Marty over 10 years ago, I've sold he and his partner millions of dollars of life insurance. We put disability insurance, critical illness insurance. We put in a group retirement savings program, as well as we've done additional insurance for other family members that each of them have referred me to. You will recall at the outset of my speech, I mentioned how I started my career following a formula that became the catalyst for all the activity in my business. That formula was 10-3-1. I built my business by getting to know my clients, which in many cases has led to strong, long-lasting relationships with the people I do business with. By becoming a trusted advisor to my clients, I've been able to invert that formula. Today, I believe with the right prospect, one call will lead to infinite client meetings and repeat business for me for years to come. I want to switch gears for a moment. Let me ask, how many of you have ever hesitated to approach a prospect or a client to talk about business because you were afraid of being rejected? Or who of you have hesitated to call a close friend to discuss insurance because you felt you were imposing and you didn't want to affect the relationship that you had with them? About 4 years ago, I was cured of this issue. I want to tell you about my best friend. Back then, he was 42 years old. He and his wife had just bought a new house. They had a little boy that was about a year old, and they were expecting their second child. At the time, he was working close to 14 hours a day, building a new business that was just starting to take off. He was always too busy to talk to me about increasing his life insurance. There were times in the past that I did approach him, but as I said earlier, he was too busy to take the time. There was always something more pressing. One night, he and I went out for dinner, our guys' night, which we usually did every few months. 3 martinis and a couple of bottles of wine later, he leaned over to me and he says, "Rich, promise me something. If something ever happens to me, I want to make sure that you'll always be there to look after my little boy." He went on to remind me how men in his family, some of them, had passed away at a young age. And if something like that were to happen to him, he wanted to make sure that I'd be there as a mentor for his little boy. I gave him my word, but with one condition. What came next kind of shocked me when I think about it. I said, "I'll do my part, but you need to do your part. You need to take care of your family," I said, "by purchasing the right amount of life insurance to properly look after them." Now, as I said earlier, we'd had a lot to drink to that point in time, and my comments served to sober us both up. In fact, it sort of changed the tone of the rest of the evening, and a short while after that, we both decided to go our separate ways, got in cabs, and went home. I didn't hear from him for a couple of days after that, which was out of character because he and I had a habit of speaking at least twice a day. When he did call me a few days later, he started the conversation by telling me how furious he was with me. Angrily, he told me he always felt that our friendship was unconditional, and my comments to him a few nights before had made him question that fact. I shot back and I reminded him what I said to him. I didn't say to him that he had to buy the insurance for me. If he didn't want to do business with me, I would be more than happy to introduce him to any number of people that I knew that would be able to look after him the way he needed to be looked after. I just wanted him to buy the insurance that he needed to look after his young family. A short while later, we did get together, and thankfully he did substantially increase his coverage, because less than a year later, he was diagnosed with cancer. And 4 months after that, he died. He left a wife and 2 young babies under the age of 3. Because he took my advice and bought sufficient life insurance, his wife had the luxury of taking her time before deciding whether or not to go back to work. Today, she and the kids still continue to live in their house, and financially, they've carried on as if nothing has ever happened. I will live the rest of my life trying to recover from the painful experience of losing one of my closest and dearest friends. I can't imagine what their life would be like and the guilt I would feel if I had not spoken my mind that night when he and I were having dinner over 4 years ago. I'd like this story to serve as a reminder to all of you that we need to be proud of what we do. We don't just sell products. We financially save lives. We provide for widows, widowers, and orphans. We deliver tax-free cash that replaces income and financially cares for families and businesses. Throughout my career, my reliance on goals and the support of mentors has helped me achieve a level of success in my business that I'm most proud of. My process of asking questions and listening to my clients has allowed me to take the time to understand their hopes, dreams, wishes, and fears. I believe my approach has helped me become a trusted advisor to my clients. And the steps that I've gone over today in my speech have helped me realize personal satisfaction and financial success in my career. I hope what I've shared with all of you today will help you all experience tremendous growth in your businesses and help all of you to derive greater satisfaction with the work that you do for your clients. Thank you for your time.